And now we will kickstart our panel on Omni-Channel, and I really actually love the name of our session. Omni-Channel is table stakes, what are you serving? Omni-Channel is one of these words that we say a lot, and they mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. Very often when we say Omni-Channel, we think of large brands, and they're like multi-million-dollar type of campaigns. But Omni-Channel can be something as simple as adding digital mail to your email campaigns, right? It can be quite simple. So what I would love for us to kind of, first before we get in, maybe we'll start with introductions and then we'll get into our Omni-Channel talks.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. I am Lockie Andrews. I'm the Chief Digital Officer of Untuckit. I started with the company, actually. I've been in consulting for 15 years, and Untuckit reached out to me 18 months ago to help them on their digital transformation journey. And as of January, I was named the Chief Digital Officer, so I'm excited to be here, and excited to talk about Untuckit. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Meera Murthy. I head of strategy at Evergage. Evergage is a personalization and customer data platform. We enable brands and retailers to talk to their prospects and customers at an individual level. I've been at Evergage for 5 years. I've been in this space for way longer than that, working with retailers on strategy and execution.
Hi, I'm Chris Hardisty. I'm the Senior Vice President of E-commerce at Clarks. I just recently joined them. So prior to that, I was with Lacoste as their Vice President of Physical Retail and Digital for North America.
Hi, Behzad Soltani. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Movado Group. Many of you may know Movado by our flagship brand, which is Movado, but we do have 11 brands total, both owned and licensed. And we make, obviously, Swiss luxury timepieces and fashion watches. Great to be here.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. So let's get into this Omni-Channel. So maybe start by talking about what does Omni-Channel actually mean to you and your brand?
Well, at Untuckit, we have 75 stores currently, and we started out online. So for us, it really is about a seamless experience from a customer perspective. We're living in an age, finally, where we aren't siloed. We should not be thinking about channels. We think about our customer. If he or she buys a shirt at one of our stores, they simply want to be able to exchange it, return it in whatever channel they choose, and be able to find consistency across all of the different channels. So to us, it's just seamless retail that's modern.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. That it's seamless and it's life cycle, right? It's a one person and consistent actions. I love that.
Exactly.
Echoing very similar thoughts. So Omni-Channel, at the end of the day, it's the term, all that means is how are you understanding your customers and how are you creating that great experience? And from my perspective, the two key areas where we see customers focused on to create omni-channel experiences is one, breaking the data silos, right? Ultimately, there's no channel silos, there's no data silos, it needs to be all about the customer. And how are you doing that as a brand, as a retailer? How are you creating that single view of that customer? And the second, and I'm gonna go back to channels for just a little bit in that, often omni-channel, we talk about customers and make it all about customers. And most of us, when we go back, and if you have to write down, what are the channels that you'd focus on or points of interactions that you would focus on, we'd all list web and in-store, mobile app, email. But often the forgotten channels tend to be call center. So sales associates that are still picking up their phone and calling their key preferred customers, and these are your most loyal customers that are gonna keep coming back to your store and making purchases. And those two channels tend to be forgotten, but those are also your most powerful channels because it's already an opportunity where they have that individual conversation. So I'd say two key areas that we focus on is, are you touching every touch point that your customer can interact with you, as well as are you breaking all your data silos and creating that single view?
Yeah, so I think both you guys have excellent points, so I won't repeat what they've had to say, but agree 100%. At Clarks, one of the things I'm joining from my experience at Lacoste to come to Clarks is to try to help them on their omni-channel journey in the US. We've got some omni-channel pieces in place, but we're also trying to further establish that and bring it to the table because, to your point, it is table stakes. I think the big piece is beyond like what does omni-channel mean to the brand? It's also what is it, how do you flip that around and what does that mean to the customer? And for us, it's about how do we get our organization aligned? Not just technology, because there's a lot of technology solutions, but an organizational backing and an understanding that from all those different touch points that Meera brought up, that we understand and we build the processes and pieces in place to make it easier on the stores and our different, or customer care, whomever, to execute. Because unfortunately, what's happening in today's world is often we are putting more and more things in place in our stores or in our call centers or wherever, and at the same time reducing the resources with which we execute those. So we're adding complexity and then reducing the manpower to do it, which is tough, especially on the store employees.
Well, one thing that I would just add for brands, omni-channel gets a bit more complicated because you normally have your stores and you have your online properties, but for brands, again, you have your retail partners, stores, and online channels, and also then you have marketplaces. And some of these things are a lot easier to control than others, but ultimately the consumers are interacting with your brand, so it's really, really important for you to be able to control that. And then I know the technology that goes to solve for these things, a lot of times when you have full control over your stack is a bit easier to do than when you don't. And I think the buzzword these days is called unified commerce. I think that's the technology that goes across. I'm not aware of one that you go across marketplaces and your customers. Yeah. But that's a major challenge for us to solve for, so it gets a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and I'm glad that you actually brought up technology, right? Because, well, there's so much technology out there. So I'm kind of curious to hear, and maybe some of your recommendations to everybody here is, one, how do you decide what technology to adopt for your company? And because we've kind of talked a little bit about this online, offline, we can maybe focus also, how do you create this frictionless connection between online and offline with technology?
Because I come from a consulting background, I get an opportunity to really peer behind the curtain of a number of brands. So I've worked with large brands like Nike to a digitally native brand like Untuckit. And what I find is where most of those technology initiatives go wrong is in the beginning, at the business requirements and technical requirements and that translation. And adding to the fact that from let's just use marketing, in the marketing tech stack, I'm sure you've all seen the CBI Insights graph with 5,000 MarTech, and it's actually 6,242. It's even more than 5,000. So with that, you have an enormous slate. No one can keep track of that many tech vendors. So you have to be ruthlessly vigorous about going through and making sure whatever problem you're trying to solve or whatever opportunity you're trying to seize, when you do that vendor selection process, be 100% clear on what you are trying to do, make that your true north, and do not get dissuaded by the bells and the whistles. Someone threw in some AI and all of a sudden everyone's off down an AI path when you were trying to solve for simple logistics. It happens. It happens a lot. So for us, we really look at that first point of making sure, is this the relevant retailer? Is this the relevant vendor? Do they match from a cultural perspective? And then the last thing that I always stress is we need return on investment if we're talking about MarTech. If you're talking about logistics, you'll figure out whatever the KPI of success will be for that. But keeping people focused on that helps tremendously when I come to a conference and something goes wrong. You are very clear on your true north. Is this the relevant retailer and brand as well as the technology? And then ultimately, are we driving towards that point of success, which for us is going to be return on investment?
Yeah, that is absolutely fantastic advice. We all talk to a lot of vendors, and it's so easy to just get a little bit distracted by all the amazing technology that is out there, because there is so much. So keeping just kind of your eye on that true north, like I'm actually solving for this one specific challenge, and let me find technology for that challenge. It really resonates.
I'll actually piggyback on what you said on return on investment. So when choosing platforms specifically, so customer data platforms solve for that, breaking the data silos, what we often see in our implementation process is if we're not rigorous and disciplined about identifying ways that you can identify your customers, right? Omni-channel is a fantastic vision, But the reality is most websites, most e-commerce sites, have 5% of your customers that actually identify themselves, right? Then when you start talking about email is a better channel because you obviously know them. But when you start talking about ad tech or in-store, how are you identifying what are all the mechanisms that you have today? Right? You're sitting on a wealth of data. Often this data is sitting across different silos, but still, these are silos that you can tap into, and this is data that you own already. So taking that moment in that process of identifying business requirements, this is probably why I should have dropped off my cell phone there, but I'll leave it here. But being able to tie what are your business requirements, what are the use cases, and for those use cases, what types of identification do you need? How can you understand your customer? It's a vision, understand your customer. What does that mean in reality? And now when you bring in ROI, well, if you're only understanding 5% of your customers and you're trying to talk to them about in-store offers based on their in-store purchases, now you're targeting 5% of your customer base that you can actually influence in a site channel. So being able to think about what is that data that you're relying on, is that accessible across all these channels, and are you able to tie it back to the customer?
Yeah, so similarly, I would say as a leader, probably the single most important thing you need to do is decipher between cool technology and customer innovation. Mm-hmm. And that's a difficult thing to do. It's very easy to just copy what your competitors are doing, right? Everybody has this particular vendor, so why don't we just use them? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to bring value to you or your customer, just because others are doing it. And so being able to really decipher, I mean, everybody, so all 6,400, I lost track of the number, but it's probably different between when you just quoted it and now. But you know, from that standpoint, everybody commits to being able to drive your business, 20, 30, 40%. So, how do you decipher what's really going to do that? Requires a lot of thought, and honestly, sometimes a lot of ignoring the noise around you because there's a ton of it. And for us, we're in the business of selling footwear, right? We have a very simple business. There's a lot of competition, but at the end of the day, we sell shoes, and we sell really good, comfortable shoes. And trying to stay focused on that and how we do that best for our customers is essential.
Absolutely.
Well, what I would say is having the ability to have a flexible technology stack and being agile, because these things constantly come. I mean, it used to be CRM, now it's CDP, and tomorrow it's going to be another acronym. So we'll try to stay away from super black box type of technology that it doesn't integrate with other pieces, because there's always something that comes up that you may want to essentially leverage within your business. So for us, that's a critical piece. What we've been focusing on, again, I mentioned we have 11 brands and we're global, so imagine the number of websites, you add currency and languages, that the permutation gets pretty big. And if you add various platforms out there to this, it just makes it impossible to manage. So again, for Movado Group, what we've been focusing on consolidating a lot of our platforms, both on the commerce side and the single view of the consumers, because ultimately that is the most important thing, is getting close and to your customers, see how they're using your products. So those are the pieces we have been focusing on.
Yeah, great. I want us to shift gears just a little bit and talk about data. We've talked a lot about it already this morning, and especially coming from the CDP world, you know that best. So as we have gotten better at analyzing data, perhaps through AI, maybe like some other technologies, tell us a little bit about how do you leverage data to better understand your customers' buying habits, specifically across channels?
So the first thing that I did in coming into Untuck It was make sure our data governance and the data hygiene was there. And it's surprising because someone hadn't done that before I arrived.
It's not surprising. Actually, earlier today I was given a little bit of a talk about the address data. It is one of the most fundamental data you have, or there's so much of it is simply wrong, right? Because people, they enter things incorrectly during the checkout process, and you'll be surprised so many companies out there still don't validate that during the checkout process. So that some of the basic data can be probably the most like useless that you have.
Exactly, and it's starting from the foundational. I think we've been talking about that all morning, and making sure the foundational data that you have is clean, because ultimately we all want to get to the AI and machine learning, right? That's really what the data is, at least from our perspective, about. But before you get there, there's some baby steps. And so for us, we've made sure from our best customers, we're going to start again with our true north of the loyalists, our ambassadors, the people who will buy 30 of our shirts. Yes, men do shop like women with shoes, with their shirts, which is pretty amazing, and understanding everything about them. So collecting lifestyle information. We actually partnered with a great company, Simon Data, their CDP, as well as do a light CRM touch. And in partnering with them, driving insights that we used alongside Facebook lookalike audiences, we were able to, through that partnership, which we started at the beginning of the year, after the first quarter, we saw a 42% return on investment, in effect paying for all of their expenses plus our internal costs, and that was fully loaded in 3 months, which was tremendous. But because we took that data, cleansed it, layered it on top of, Facebook has 2.5 billion users with their algorithm. We're never going to have, at least at this point, an opportunity to build that. But layering those two together saw us drive tremendous returns in a short amount of time. So you can start small and then leverage what others have built to get even better at what you do.
Especially, and kind of coming from the CTV platform world, you can dive into that even more.
Absolutely. So one of the things we see is customers actually, they invest a lot in creating that single view of a customer, single data source. But often the challenge is if you're not able to activate at that individual level. A good example, this is one where when we have conversations, we see customers saying, well, we had our data science team build a model. They built a propensity model to understand people that are buying shoes and what is the likelihood that in the next 14 days they're going to buy a handbag. Great use case. They build this model, they identify the audience, and then they convert that into a marketing campaign, maybe a promotional campaign where there's an offer associated with buying a handbag specifically. But then you send it out. You've invested a lot in understanding your customers, understanding what she likes, which designers she likes, what styles she likes. But now when you're speaking to her after all this, you're speaking in a very generic, still a one-to-many, because you're sending her, when you have to communicate at an audience level, it's still a banner that just has a few different shoes, right? Versus a specific type of handbag that I like, or specific style. So there we keep reminding when we work with our customers is, how are you activating at a one-to-one level? And I'd ask all of you to go back and assess your outbound marketing programs to see, are you leveraging all the data that you have? Do you have platforms to leverage all the data that you have to be able to not just activate at a segment level, but being able to activate at that individual level?
Yeah, so I'll just add just a quick piece to that, is that for a brand like ours, and I'm sure for Movado it's probably very similar, retail is a component of our business, but it's not our entire business. In fact, we're primarily selling to retail partners. So a lot of the data that we're able to capture at retail is our customer data, and we're able to educate not just ourselves and sort of our campaigns, but also our teams on wholesale and in our product design teams on what customers are looking for. Because a lot of their feedback, right, just comes from buyers and merchants within the retail community that's buying from us. So we leverage that data in our marketing campaigns, definitely in our email and how we go out and send triggered or just general campaigns. But beyond that, we're trying to make sure that our wholesale team understands what our customers are telling us, so that they can take that into account in how they're approaching their side of the business.
Great. To add to Chris's point, obviously number one is that, again, from a brand perspective, we have a couple of data points. Our first-party data used to be pretty small because majority of the information comes through our retailers. Now that we're growing our direct-to-consumer business, we're capturing a lot of more information. With that comes the ability, or the need, I should say, to be able to analyze the information. So one of the first big investments we have made is actually in people. We've built up a data science team, and then a bunch of smart PhD people that actually know what to do with the information. And a shameless plug here for Evergage. We actually do use Evergage as our CDP. And as soon as we plugged it in, and there was a sea of data, hundreds of millions of data points coming to us from all of our properties, So like now, what do you do with all this information? So again, we have put the team at work, and we're getting some really first-party information from our consumers. And again, that team, another thing, we are obsessed with how the consumers are using our products and what information they're giving, kind of signaling to us. Some of it is directly, some of it we actually have to go out there and grab. So again, our team they've essentially built as a really cool project they've kind of taken on, is that they have scraped a lot of the reviews at SKU level for our products across all of the web as much as they can get. And the amount of information that we are getting from not only just the ratings, also the comments, there's a lot of insightful information there. So again, the volume is very large, so that's where the things like machine learning and AI comes into place for us to be able to capture that and feed it back to our design teams to be able to make better products for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely noticing a theme here around customer data platforms, and I think it's actually, they're powerful, right? So we all know that with all the information that we have, if we bother to collect, and we've actually made sure to collect all the relevant data, then how can we leverage technology to then actually help us use this data on the one-to-one personalization, right? So we're no longer, because let's say you know Susan and you know what she likes, so to then actually be able to really speak to Susan in her own voice and tone of things, it's important. So we have just a few minutes left, so maybe we can kind of finish up with one of the questions that we actually often gets asked, is what do you see as the next concierge-like service?
This is an interesting question, and I guess I'll put on my futurist hat for this. And I'm not specifically talking about Untuckit, but I think we're living in a wonderful time, and we actually do have the millennials to thank for this, that they've been able to push us and force us to change the status quo and to really think about quality of life and making sure from a concierge perspective, being a brand and being able to serve your consumer base, before it was, that's not our business and that's not what we do. Today, I think, and in the future, it will consistently be, who is my customer, what do they need, and then how can my brand participate in that interaction and that experience with our customers to make sure we're delighting them, we're surprising them in interesting ways. And as we use this data to understand better about what our customers want and what they need, we can then think freely about how we can structure our stores, our experiences in delivery. Is it a direct model? Is it expedience because it's something that someone really needs now? So maybe that's another partnership that one can do from a delivery perspective. But ultimately, I think concierge is going to become table stakes, similar to this panel, that we need to start thinking about how we deliver those solutions.
Similarly, I think we've all been talking about data-driven marketing, right? We've spent the last 5 years getting more data into the hands of marketers so that every decision they make is based on their customer data, et cetera. I think where we're heading, and we're already seeing this, is data-driven selling. Right? Taking all this data that you've given marketers and making it accessible to your sales channels, so to that sales associate that's in the store, to your call center agent, and any other human interaction that you have. Think back to 60, 70 years ago where we used to walk into a mom and pop store and they knew everything about you. They knew your preferences, they knew what you liked. But now we've tremendously scaled, which is great, but how do you still bring back that conversation? So concierge, once you establish that infrastructure to be able to drive data to them, then the opportunities are boundless.
Yeah, I mean, for what I think what we've all experienced, so as far as Lockie said about moving the needle, I think you can't have this conversation without discussing what Amazon continues to do to push the level of convenience. So we could say concierge, we could talk about convenience, just an incredible amount of innovation that they've put out there that customers truly care about, right? So we're constantly trying to figure out, how to get better and better and faster at 2-day shipping. Amazon's already talking about 1, right? Yeah. So in fact, they're not only talking about it, they've done it. And then as we're talking, I'm sure we're going to walk out of here and it's going to be it's like within 30 minutes, a guaranteed delivery. So
they're actually doing that.
That's just, it's happening. And it's for like a brand like ours, or all of ours, but in differing levels, right? Where we're a wholesaler or a retailer, then there's a lot that goes into building that sort of infrastructure. And so we're trying to figure out better ways to do that. For us to stay focused on what we do best, it's about designing and developing the best shoes we can, the best products we can, and at the best comfort we can offer. And focusing on that, I think, and making sure that we can deliver on that promise is most important to who we are and what our DNA is. Last thing I should say, since everyone else has mentioned their CDPs, I feel like I'm taking a nasty note if I don't mention that we use Agile One, and we have been very happy with their CDP.
So if there's any CDP vendors out here, this is definitely a plug.
Great. Well, for us, again, trying to stay close to the consumers, nothing, again, super cutting edge, but chat is super helpful. We have chat on our sites, and it allows us to get a lot of great feedback and help our consumers. There's a lot of gifting that goes on within our category, so always being able to help people to choose the right product it's important. So that's one of the basic tools that we use is very effective.
Hi, I'm Jim Goj with MSTS. I'm curious as if you're using any of your e-commerce sites for B2B or B2B2C.
We do have, actually, absolutely, we do have B2B capabilities within our ecosystem. They're not consolidated. It's not a single platform that does both B2B, B2C as it stands today, but we do offer that as well, yeah.
Similar for us. Again, we actually use the same platform, but it's not built on the same versions or technologies exactly. So, but we do have an important part of our business is B2B.
Thank you to our panelists.
All right, thank you.